Training apex-level hypnotherapists and psychotherapists since 1988, the Institute for Psychosystems Analysis is now accepting applications for CADA 3 of our professional training course, taught online by Steve, Pauline and myself. If you resonate with the material on Jung To Live By and believe that your calling is to be a therapist, then check out the link to our course webpage in the description. We look forward to welcoming you on board in June of this year, 2021.
To reject Thanatos and live.
So, Gareth, and this is a bit of a killer question,
Yeah.
and feel free to answer it
Yes.
as you wish. What was it like for you growing up with a couple of Jungian therapist parents?
I think the thing that's always stood out to me is how good the communication in the house has been, and how open everyone's been with, emotional dialogue. So it forces you to be more self-reflective in how, say, you process things or how you do things that might affect other people, and you can then better them, rather than just being the victim of your complexes without them being brought to consciousness, if that makes sense. So that's something that's always stood out for me. I've always felt like I can communicate my problems and we can work them out properly, even if it's between each other, rather than just shouting and screaming and they're never being spoken of again and nothing really coming from that interaction that's beneficial.
Yeah.
I feel.
It must have been challenging at times.
Yeah.
Because there's a kind of psychological intimacy that isn't always
Yes.
there in most families. I mean, it certainly wasn't there in my family,
Yeah.
my family background, and I'm sure Steve would say, Dad would say the same about his. So it was probably quite unique in that regard, and obviously we're still
I think it's
like that
definitely
now,
unique.
aren't we?
Yeah. I've got nothing to compare it to, so it's difficult because it's all I've known.
Well, you have your friends' families.
I do,
don't you?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose they're just ordinary people, really.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely fine.
Of course.
I do see the merit in that, but nothing's brought to consciousness, is it? They're just base interactions, and that's it.
Yeah.
There's no substance in the communications.
Is there a downside to it at all?
It's a tough one. Not that I can think of consciously. I think it can be mentally draining working through things in that way, but I think ultimately afterwards, once you've done that work on yourself, then you realise the benefit of it, because nothing that's worth doing is easy, is it? So
No, that's true.
it's easier to just cop out in the moments if you feel a bit uncomfortable and to deal with maybe issues between ourselves, but once you've worked through that process, then I think it's beneficial over and above any discomfort you might feel at the time.
I think that's a very valuable point you make, because obviously there's what we would call technically transferences within all families, and very strong feelings can get thrown around, but nothing ever really resolves out from that. And obviously when people do transfer how they feel about something, they get a sense of relief out of doing that. In we would call it dumping in the colloquial, wouldn't we?
I was going to say, I was in the toilet and it feel a lot better afterwards. It's not great for the person that you've done it on, though, is it? So,
no, it isn't. No, indeed. And you will know this too because of the training that you've done and the work that you're doing as a therapist.
Yes.
That, you know, when that kind of thing happens, it doesn't actually matter whether it's positive or negative.
No.
You know, it can still be burdensome, can't it?
It can,
so, for example, you know, there might be traits that you say see in me or Dad, and then really they're in you.
Yes.
But you would probably prefer that, say,
they were your traits, not mine.
Yeah. So either way, it can be a problem, can't it?
It can.
With transferential issues.
It can, positive or negative.
Yeah.
It can. Well, it's, just got to do the work.
You do.
You have to deal with the material.
Yes, you do indeed. I mean, I can remember one of your favourite cartoons being Fairly Odd Parents. I don't know whether that would help to sort of sum up how you felt, certainly when you were a lot younger.
The god fairy things. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you've picked up on the odd aspect of that, haven't you?
Yes.
Maybe more than the...
Yes, I have.
The overall dynamic of the show.
That's true.
They're just fairies. Yeah. Like the odd thing isn't really emphasised in it. Do you feel that?
That's an interesting perspective, because I'd kind of more taken on the Fairly Odd Parents.
Are you worried about
part.
thinking you guys are odd?
Yes, I think we probably were.
Yeah. I mean, maybe from an outside person, but I've grown up with that, so it's not odd. It's my reality.
Yes.
That makes sense. So it's not odd to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Differences of perspective, perhaps.
It is. Well, you see, this is something I think that you bring to the family, and something that's really great about you.
Thank you.
Is that you often are very left of field, even down to the P button on the hob. You know, it's like, well, yes, I can see the logic in that.
Sometimes, like to everyone else. Yeah.
And we're sitting up here, Dad and I, you know, working, doing a seminar, and there's, you know, we can smell the smoke rising, you know, and it's like,
oh no,
what's Gareth up to?
Yeah.
But no, you know, seriously, you do bring very often a completely different perspective to things, and sometimes you've helped me to reframe things as well that maybe I've been struggling with, and
it's good to have different outlooks.
Yeah,
I suppose.
Yes.
It can help you decipher what reality is more than if you've got different perspectives of the same thing, so it's not just funneled through your own bias that way. Yeah. So you're more, as we've discussed in other videos, more process oriented.
That's right.
So you've got a more grounded sense of reality than I have. So I'm off in the stars constantly. Yeah. Maybe I can offer a different perspective that might make you think differently about how you do things, and you get a more well-rounded picture of what the world is and what life is, really, then. Yes. Yeah, because we've got more information to deal with.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, that P button will never be the same again. Every time I go to press that.
I was convinced in that moment it meant pause. So I thought I was pausing.
Well, it should do. Wouldn't that have been helpful if it had actually been set up in that way that you could just pause the
flashing.
cooking?
So I thought, it's on hold now, but no, it was actually heating up more. So.
And in good intuitive style, what did you do? You thought, I'll just go and get another pan.
I was buying another pan.
I would probably have tried to have salvaged it at that point, but no. What's the point of that?
The time was more precious than the money required to replace it, so I made a balanced judgment.
You did? Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're making light of it, but nonetheless, I still think it's a very helpful perspective to have. And
I hope so.
Yes. Yeah.
It certainly gives people a different view on things.
Yes.
You know, take how you want, I guess. Yeah.
It's true of all problems, isn't it, very often, because we do, particularly when we're complexed, we do get into a kind of a loop of thinking about things in a certain way or behaving in a certain way.
Yeah.
And something like that can be enough to just snap you out, can't it?
It can.
And,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Definitely.
Oh. just moving on from what we've been talking about, Gaz, to
Yes.
a slightly more serious note, I guess. You've been around Carl Jung all your life.
Yes.
You've been steeped in it growing up.
Yeah.
And it must have seemed a bit strange sometimes to have parents like that.
Yeah.
But you're now a working therapist within IPSA.
Yeah.
We're mentoring you as we've mentored James and continue to. And tell me something about what it's been like to grow up in that environment. What have you learned?
It's always been my reality, so I've never viewed it as being different because I've never grown up with anything else. So it's possible, but you know, obviously when you're young and you compare it to other people's families, it's obviously different, but it's hard to explain. It's different, but it's your normality.
Yes.
So, but yeah, I wouldn't change how I've experienced it personally. I think it's set me up really well for the real world, to be honest. Yeah.
Is it what's made you want to be a therapist yourself? Has that influenced that decision?
It must have done.
Yeah.
You know, I think it must have influenced me in that way. I've always had an inclination to want to help people.
Yes.
And growing up in that environment has guided me more towards that again. So it seems like the natural trajectory of my life is towards that goal. So yeah, that's definitely.
We talk a lot on the channel about a kind of a barefoot approach to things, and knowing you as I do, you kind of have that barefoot approach.
Right.
That's probably connected to, in part, to your interest in martial arts as well, I think. And because in the spirit of that, you know, traditionally, as well as obviously being something through which you discipline yourself, there's also a lot of emphasis on helping other people.
Yes, there is, and raising them up as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you're essentially using your position that you've acquired to help lift other people up to that level. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. There's definitely an overlap, but also to the idea of the barefoot therapist, it expresses the naturalness of it for someone too, and I think it's been natural in you
more
to
organic,
go in this.
In a way. Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Yes, I'd agree. Yeah, definitely. I agree with you.
Yeah. For the guys out there, could you say something about the type of martial arts you do, or what you're into?
Yeah. So at the moment, I do combat sports, mixed martial arts. I haven't been able to, obviously, because of Corona, but that's my preferred sort of medium for it, because it's more obviously on the physical side, and you know, trying to put it into words.
Well, I guess it helps you to express your masculinity.
Yeah, it satisfies that side of myself. You can go and, you know, fight people and die as well, because obviously if you submit and you tap out, if they had kept going, you would have died. And then you accept that, and you shake hands and you go again. You know, so it's a process almost of rebirth when you're sparring with people in a way.
That makes sense. That's an interesting take on things.
So you're going through almost that, you know, kind of warrior cycle. You know, you slap hands, you fight, and if they win, as you're being choked out and you tap, you've accepted in that moment that they've taken your life from you.
Right.
You know,
in a symbolic way.
Yeah, and obviously
that is very interesting.
It stops, and, you know. You take that on board, you slap hands, and you go again, and maybe you win that time.
Right.
You know, and then it's you carry that responsibility of being able to, in that moment, potentially, if you carried on, take that person's life from them, and it's that restraint as well that it teaches you to stop when they surrender. You know, if that makes sense.
Yes.
It's hard to explain, I think, to people who don't engage in that kind of thing. I think maybe very much is a male thing in a way.
It's a fascinating thing, because I must be honest, I'd never really thought about it in that way. So each individual, what would you call it? Sparring
so
session?
It's full contact fighting, whether it's, you know, strikes and grappling, or just grappling. Mainly talking about grappling, obviously, because that's where submissions come into it. But obviously, you know, if you're being choked out, like I say, then you will die if they carry on, and you have to accept that. And so it's an ego checking thing, really. You know, it puts you in your place and builds a lot of strength, I think, mentally.
Yes, yeah. So it kind of builds in the possibility that could happen.
Yes.
But because you're doing it almost in a ritualised way.
Yes, it is ritualised. Yeah, that's probably a good way of putting it. Yeah. It's ritualised combat, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, your love of martial arts comes from your dad, and
it does,
you know,
absolutely.
And I'm sure you do have some very early memories of, you know, you've got your gloves on and you're hitting the punch bag.
There's a lot of younger me in that environment. I've grown up with it throughout my life, and I think that's why it's such a central part of who I am. Really, is that I was exposed to it on such a large scale at such a young age. During those developmental years, it's obviously impacted me, maybe at a genetic level. You know, that's like grooved into that now. Yeah. Well,
what memories do you have of those times? Because you were very involved with your dad growing up, because we were always around.
Yes.
And I mean, to have that accessibility to him, and obviously Dad would train students to have indoor students, and so again, that's something else you've been around.
It is.
Or pretty much all your life.
Yeah, well, most of my earliest memories are of students on, you know, the back garden patio or in like Brian McKinney's gym, for example.
We've got a
Chinatown
lovely picture
as
of you from there, haven't we?
Yeah, I remember going to Chinatown to see people. Loads. Most, as I say, of my early memories are of that. Yeah. So that's, as I say, I think that's why it's impacted me so deeply, and it's such an important aspect of my life now to carry that on. You know, through the medium of martial arts, and in my case, more combat-oriented sports, like Muay Thai, MMA, things like that, and submission wrestling. Yeah.
I mean, I can remember you at from my perspective, a very young age. You must have been maybe 10, 11, 12, around there, and occasionally you'd actually spar with some grown men, wouldn't you?
Yes.
And you had that kind of fight in you. Even then, you would... Obviously, they were respectful to you.
Of course,
Of course. But it didn't stop you having a really good go and grappling that you did with them.
But it's a safe environment to, to do that, really. Yeah. And I think the way you say, obviously, sparring with adults, I think it's important always to, to spar with people who are better than you as well.
Yes.
And otherwise, what's the point? You're just working out on people. You spar with people who are more skilled than you, bigger than you, and that's how you improve then, because it forces that adaptation to be able to handle that environmental stressor.
Yes.
So your body's forced to get better.
I mean, this sounds to me like these things are incredibly important for men.
Yes.
To have those physical outlets.
Yeah.
And what's it meant for you personally?
I think, maybe from my perspective, for men, it's almost a rite of passage, to be tested in that way physically, and then you earn respect from other men who are in that peer group, and then, that confirms you on the inside, and I think that's important for men to feel a part of that, and to be, respected and accepted by hard men, in a way, who have been through a lot of physical hardship. That's important. Nothing virtuous about a weak man, is there? So, yeah.
Do you think it's important for women to value that as well in men?
I think from a man's perspective, it's important to have, that side of them confirmed externally by a woman, definitely.
Yes.
To feel that they're confirmed and validated as a man, as a strong man. I do believe that's important.
Yes, It strikes me too that it's a very competitive, or it can be it can be a very solitary thing, or it can be a very competitive thing, can't it? The martial arts world.
Yes, it can.
And you do have that competitive
I do.
side to you.
Yes, I do.
Not only has that been obvious with your martial arts, but when you were young, you were also a fantastic karter as well.
Yes.
Go-karter.
Yeah.
And I think we saw that same competitive spirit
it's that
in
drive
you then.
that's always been in me, I think.
Yeah. And so much so, I mean, you had like you wore like a red strip, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yes, if you'd like to maybe talk about that.
As cringe as it sounds saying it now at 26, so the marshals used to refer to me as Little Schumacher.
That's right.
Because I had a red OMP suit and helmet. Yeah.
Yeah, you had the outfit, didn't you?
Yeah.
And that's kind of led you into a love of motorsport generally, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And I know also too, you're an advanced driver.
I am, yes. With the IAM.
Yes.
Yeah. There's definitely been grooves throughout my life. I think those competitive outlets for me have always been important, whether it's driving or martial arts. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you have your own sports car now?
Yeah, I do.
Don't you?
That's sort of like an extension on from those past activities, and almost like a homage to my motorsport days, really.
Yes.
It's a way for me of carrying it on almost spiritually without actually still being involved with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm still engaged with that aspect of myself even when I go like the shops because of what I choose to drive. So it's being, what's the word? That side of me to an extent is being satisfied through that without me being directly engaged with it.
Yes.
I feel.
Yes. Yeah. It's been quite a project for you, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. It's been good. It's been good fun. Just doing it up and bits and pieces on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it's been important for you because
Yeah.
you are very much an individual anyway, and it's allowed you to express your individuality.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. It's fiercely independent and individual.
Yes.
So cars to me are like clothing. They're literally vehicles for self-expression. It's obviously if you dress a particular way, you're saying something to the world, then aren't you, by how you dress? And I think it's the same with cars because you wear them in the same way you wear a t-shirt when you go out in public. So
it's an extension of your persona.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get across.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's important for that to reflect who I am on the inside in a way. What I'm all about. Otherwise you just end up looking like everyone else, which I don't want to do.
Can you just mention a little bit too, Gareth, about your involvement in the creative industry as well, because that's something else that you've grown up with in our peculiar family.
Yeah.
And you've been heavily involved in that, involved with the videos that we've made, and I know you've accompanied Dad on some very important meetings as well. I mean, you did actually go with him to, was it Berlin?
Yeah, Berlin.
To meet a Netflix producer as well?
Yes, I do, yeah. It was certainly interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they were all sort of crazy creative types as well, so it was nice to be around similar people, I felt, and the city is very much a reflection of that, certainly the east side of Berlin, with the ex-communist quarter. It's all been taken over by the art scene, and like murals on everything, there's wacky food, and everyone's got weird clothes. It's great.
You see yourself living there?
Yeah, I probably could.
Could you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're an artist yourself as well?
Yes.
A fine artist?
Yeah, I am.
So we know you have a keen eye for these things.
Yeah, I do. I do very, very much value creativity. I mean, I believe art is the purest form of human expression. Really, it is the expression of the unconscious manifested into physical reality, isn't it?
Yes.
You're taking something from the inside of your head and you're putting it into the real world. So it's But for me, it's important. As someone who lives in their unconscious all the time.
It's a very rich environment in there, Gareth. We know this.
Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely.
And to some extent, I think you kind of have to turn your head inside out in order for other people to see just how rich your imagination is.
Yeah.
And I know with respect to your artwork, you can go from producing a piece of fine art, a very technically detailed and perfected piece of fine art, to doing a lot more abstract work as well. So you've got that bandwidth.
Yeah, I'm very broadly based.
You are.
I can do all the technical, more illustrative draftsman style stuff, or I can do the more conceptual work as well, where it's just expression.
Yes.
Through whatever medium you're working in, rather than trying to replicate something that already exists. so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely.
Yeah. Is that what, in a way, impressed you about Berlin as well?
Yes.
About sort of seeing the seeds of creativity coming back into a culture or an environment that had been previously
because
so
they're
oppressed.
superimposed onto something that was so oppressive and evil as well.
Yes.
And it's turned that into something beautiful, and I think that's a really lovely thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to have that appreciation of it, which you clearly did have.
Yes, I did feel, because of my background, I was able to appreciate the work there that maybe other people look past because it's just on everyday buildings and the like.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you were capable of that kind of appreciation creatively of the culture and the environment in Berlin, but also able to utilise other aspects of yourself, because obviously it was an important business meeting as well.
Yes, it was.
I mean, that was what the trip was for, and you were with Dad, and you were a representative for the company and for what we were doing, and you stepped up to that as well, and I know Dad was very proud of what you did on behalf of us all. Yes, he was.
Yeah, but it's just one of those. You just got to get stuck in and do your part, absolutely, and throw your suit on and go and handle business, and then you can enjoy yourself afterwards.
So do you think it's important to have that kind of flexibility?
I feel so big. It comes naturally, I think, to me because of my default settings, so it might be something that other people find a little bit more difficult, but for me certainly I can kind of flip between things and drop plans for others that maybe make a bit more sense in that moment, that sort of thing. So I've got no issue with being flexible.
Yeah.
But I view it as an important quality. I think especially in that sort of industry, it's all over, kind of all over the place. It's not, a 9 till 5 sort of get up. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So clearly you have this bandwidth. I mean, this is part of, I think, your genomic potential really, and you would not take well to being restricted.
No.
Artificially, would you? It seems to me anyway, from knowing you as I do, that it's important for you to express all those elements of your nature, for you to feel good about yourself. Because
all of those aspects make up who I am. I feel I need to fulfill them all to be a whole person, rather than just fitting society's preset narrative for me as a cog. And I don't accept that. It's a defiance in a way, but you're only here once, so I think you should do absolutely what you have to do to fulfill yourself in that way. Otherwise you're not living for yourself, are you? And then when you're on your deathbed, you think, well, what was the point of that? I spent my life making some faceless person happy and lots of money, so
Gaz, Dad and I see an awful lot of young men in our clinical work who say they fear death, but really they're afraid of life. It's the opposite of that. What advice would you give to them?
If I could put it into a few words, I would say you need to reject Thanatos and live.
If you're looking to take your study of depth psychology and personal development to the next level using Steve and Pauline's 40-year-long clinical experience as your personal guide, then make sure you check out Jung To Live By's flagship offering, Discover Your Personal Myth Ultimate Handbook. For anyone who has a calling deep in their very genome to become who they truly feel they should be, this guide is utterly indispensable. Pick up your copy today and make 2021 the year you truly begin to become yourself.